All right, so you sent us some pretty intense stuff this time around. We're talking permanent contraception, specifically vasectomies and tubal ligations, and the surge in popularity they've seen, especially, well, among young adults. It all kind of goes back to this article about how those procedures spiked right after Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022.
Wow.
Crazy, right? So we've got our work cut out for us with research papers, news articles, even some pretty heated Reddit threads to go through our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to uncover what's really driving this whole trend.
Sounds like a plan. I think what we're looking at here is, well, it's a powerful example of how like one legal decision can have these huge ripple effects throughout society, and it reshapes personal choices in ways we might not have even imagined, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
And let's just jump right into it with these research papers from George Washington University, UNC Chapel Hill, and the University of Michigan. They all found a pretty significant increase in these procedures for people between 19 and 26.
Yeah, I mean, just between May and August of 2022, vasectomies jumped up by 95%, and tubal ligations a 70% increase.
Wow. Those are some serious numbers. But the articles also mentioned that while the percentages are huge, the actual number of procedures is still relatively small.
Right. It's not necessarily about this massive, overall change in the number of procedures. It's more about like a shift, a noticeable shift in people's choices.
Yeah, it's like a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Signaling a larger trend maybe, right? And something that really stood out to me is that while both procedures did see an increase, tubal ligations were still more common overall. Why do you think that is?
It really makes you think about like the historical weight that society has put on women when it comes to contraception. For generations, it's been their responsibility. The burden has fallen disproportionately on their shoulders to prevent pregnancy.
Yeah, you're right. Like, we're seeing those expectations play out in these statistics.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if those societal norms are really changing, even with these big legal shifts.
Okay, so the research really connects this surge in permanent contraception to anxieties about losing access to abortion.
Makes sense, right? I mean, when the option to terminate a pregnancy becomes less accessible, the focus naturally shifts to just preventing it altogether.
For sure. And I was reading through some of the survey responses in the studies, and it's clear that young people are, they're really worried about losing control over their bodies and their futures.
Yeah, there's a real sense of fear. It's like a generation that's very aware of the precariousness of, their rights and the consequences of these legal changes.
One response that really got me was from a 24-year-old woman in the South. And she said she'd rather be sterilized than risk losing access to, birth control or abortion.
Wow.
It's powerful, right?
It really speaks to the level of desperation some people are feeling. They're willing to make big life choices to protect their reproductive autonomy.
Totally. But, what's interesting is that this Reddit thread you gave me adds a whole other dimension to this conversation. It's not just about the law. It's about the human side, the financial strain, the social pressures, the personal experiences that are shaping these decisions.
Yeah, I know. The Reddit thread just gives you this, raw, unfiltered glimpse into what's driving this trend. People are just putting it all out there, There's struggles, the cost of living, the fear of bringing kids into a world with climate change and economic uncertainty.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And what's really concerning is how many people are talking about the difficulty of even getting sterilized, especially when you're younger. Doctors pushing back, questioning their decisions, even requiring spousal consent. Can you believe that?
Wow.
It really raises questions about who's actually in control when it comes to reproductive choices.
That's messed up. It's one thing to want to take control of your future, but then to face all these obstacles and judgment for it, it's really unfair.
It really highlights the gap between, legal rights and actually being able to access health care.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a reminder that the fight for reproductive justice goes beyond just, passing laws. It's about making sure everyone has equal and respectful access to care.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really underscores, the complexities within the healthcare system. It's not always so simple as, having a legal right.
For sure. And going back to those Reddit comments for a sec, the financial anxiety that people are expressing, it's really something. It's not even just about affording kids. It's like feeling financially secure enough to even consider starting a family.
Yeah. It's a huge concern, especially now, right? I mean, the average cost of raising a kid to 18 in the U.S. it's like over $300,000. Then you add in housing costs and wages and
Hmm.
student loan debt. It's no wonder so many young people feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's not just the upfront costs either, right? It's like the long-term commitment, college, activities, even just basic stuff.
Right. It all adds up. And that's if everything goes perfectly. You know, no unexpected medical bills, job losses, or, another pandemic.
Oh my gosh, don't even.
It's a
It
lot.
really puts things into perspective about the economic reality for young people today. It makes you wonder if those worries are leading some to rethink parenthood altogether.
Yeah, it's a question a lot of people are asking. We're actually seeing a rise in what they call reproductive futurism.
Hmm.
Basically, anxieties about the future, like climate change or the economy, directly influencing decisions about having children.
Wow. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, huh? If people are so worried about the future that they don't have kids, it shapes the future in a way that makes those worries
Yep.
more likely to come true.
Right, exactly. It's a disturbing thought. Are we seeing a generation so disillusioned that they're just opting out?
Yeah, that's heavy. But even with all this uncertainty and anxiety, I also sense this feeling of like empowerment. From these discussions, people are taking control, making choices that align with
Yeah.
their values and their situation.
Absolutely. It's a testament to like human resilience. Roe v. Wade being overturned, I mean, it's definitely caused a lot of fear and uncertainty. But it's also pushed people to, assert their reproductive autonomy. The surge in permanent contraception, it's a direct reflection of that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a good reminder that even with setbacks, people will always find ways to exercise their agency and shape their own destinies.
Yeah.
It's pretty inspiring, actually.
And it also underscores how important it is to have access to, like, comprehensive reproductive health care, including info and resources about permanent contraception options.
100%. People need the knowledge and the support to make informed choices about their bodies and their futures.
Because at the end of the day, it's about respecting individual choice. Whether someone wants to have kids or not, their decision should be met with support, not judgment.
It always comes back to choice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it makes you think, when all these individual choices become a bigger trend, what happens then? We've talked about the personal stuff, but what about the big picture? How does this affect society?
Oh, man. That's where things get really interesting when you zoom out and look at these potential shifts. It's like a kaleidoscope, The patterns change with every turn. Fewer kids being born obviously has a huge impact on population growth, something that a lot of developed countries are already dealing with.
Right, aging populations, smaller workforces, strain on social safety nets, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And those anxieties about the future we talked about, climate change and all that, those anxieties might actually be shaping demographics too. It's like this weird feedback loop, right?
Right.
Where worries about the future affect family planning, which then affects the future.
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something. If people are so worried about the world that they choose not to have kids, they might be contributing to those worries coming true.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue, and there's no easy answer. But it does raise questions about, personal responsibility versus collective action. Are these personal choices a reflection of, society failing to deal with these global challenges?
That's a good question. And what about the economic angle? I mean, fewer kids being born has to have some kind of impact, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's basic supply and demand. Smaller families could mean less demand for certain things. Things geared towards kids, like toys, education, healthcare.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's a thought. If the people choosing permanent contraception are doing it because of money, aren't they actually making a responsible decision? Couldn't that help the economy in other ways?
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right. If people are being more intentional about being financially stable before having kids, it could actually lead to a stronger workforce and consumer base, down the line. It's not as simple as fewer kids equals economic decline.
It's way more nuanced than that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the whole cultural side of things too. As families change and evolve, it challenges what we think of as, a traditional family. We're seeing more chosen families, different paths to parenthood, people questioning those pressures to conform. Remember those Reddit threads?
Oh, yeah. People are creating their own versions of happiness. with or without kids,
Right. It's about redefining what success looks like.
on your own terms.
Exactly. And that's what I find so fascinating about this whole thing. It's not just about like numbers and trends. It's about the human stories behind it all, the anxieties, the dreams. It's all shaping the future.
Well said. So after all this, like, where do we land? What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think this surge in permanent contraception, it's a glimpse into what this generation is going through, navigating a world that's, constantly changing. It reminds us that reproductive choices are personal.
Yeah.
And they're connected to everything, our society, our economy, our culture.
Yeah, I agree. It's about respecting those choices,
Yeah.
making sure people have the info and the resources they need,
Mm-hmm.
and building a society where everyone feels empowered.
Exactly.
Wow, what a journey this has been. So for everyone listening, if this deep dive got you thinking, I encourage you to, keep exploring. Look into the research, talk about these issues, and most importantly, think about what's important to you, your own values, your own aspirations. Because understanding these trends and the choices we make, it's the first step to building a better future, a future that's just and equitable and sustainable for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a wrap for today, folks. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those questions coming.